And welcome back, everyone. We're back here with our tutorial where we left off previously. We had built out a couple of these shapes and begun to experiment with some clipping masks, layer masks, and blending modes. We also grouped some of our shapes into group folders, and we also added a nice radial gradient to our background. So from here, what we're going to do is continue to build out a couple of shapes. So you can see I've already created a new layer, which you can go ahead and do that as well. And what I want to do is create a few shapes maybe coming from the bottom of the canvas. And eventually we will tie these two groups of shapes together. So as I mentioned earlier on, when you have a shape that is cropped off of the canvas, it automatically makes it a little more dynamic and interesting. And by putting a few shapes at the bottom, it will also help us to make some tension in the piece, which is always a good thing. One of the first principles of design that I learned in school. So what I did here was just fill this layer with our same orange color that we used in our previous lesson. And for some of you who are just tuning in now, this is the color that I'm going to be using. Okay, so I'm just going to move this shape around, maybe to create some more, some balance, but we will be overlapping quite a few of these. So go ahead and hold down the Command key and click on the layer thumbnail icon over here in your layers palette. What that's going to do is create a selection around your shape. So go ahead and create another new layer, and unlike the way we did this in the previous step where we used the clipping mask, this is just another way that you guys can brush into this shape. So remember, you just have to hold down Command or Control if you're on a PC and click on the layer thumbnail in order to create that selection and get those marching ants there, as I like to call them. So switching back to the brush, you'll notice I have a large, soft, round brush selected, and we're going to stick with an opacity of about 20%, just like we did in our previous lesson. And we're just going to add a little bit of highlight here and change the blending mode to overlay. So this will give us that more of a yellow, intense lighting, which is a little more rich and vivid. So just painting in a little bit here, and zooming out, making sure it looks okay. And I'm not going to be too precious about the placement of this shape at the moment. I just want to get a couple more of these in here. Pass one. Okay, and you can just toggle that layer on and off. You can lower the opacity or play around with some of these other blending modes if you like, but that's just another way that you can fill in the shape with your brush tool. Now the nice thing about that is also that once your selection is active, you don't necessarily need to use the brush tool. You can play around with your gradient tool as well to really get some interesting shapes. Sometimes what I'll do when I'm working is I'll use the gradient tool set to either linear or radial, and just play around with coming in from different angles into that shape to see what kind of effects I can get out of it. Okay, so just continuing on with the pen, making more of these shapes. Same thing, hold down Control, click on your path, and you will get this menu. We're going to hit Make Selection and leave the feather radius at 0. Hit the X key on your keyboard to switch back and toggle between your white and orange. And with your orange selected, hold down the Alt Option key and hit Delete once again. Alright, so this is shape 4. And just like I showed you guys towards the end of our last lesson, you can hold down the Command key and press the left bracket to move that shape below, or move it down, I should say. So what you can do, is the right bracket will move it up, the left bracket will move it down. For now, I want to keep shape 4 under shape 3. Okay, so go ahead and create another new layer, and this time we will use our clipping mask method by holding down the Alt Option key. And once we see this icon here, just go ahead and click, and you'll notice this little arrow that's been added here. Okay, and then switching back to the white foreground color, overlay for the blending mode, paint in some more highlights here. And I know this may seem a bit redundant here, just going through this process and some of these steps, but it takes a bit of time to build up the foundation for our piece, and especially when you want to give the illusion of depth and 3D. It takes some time to really craft that, but we're gonna get there. So just try to be patient and build this up, taking your time. We're gonna put these two layers in a group folder and just call it shape 4. Okay, so now what we want to do is go into our shape 3 folder, shape 3, and add a layer mask. All right, now switch to your black brush and begin to just brush out a little bit of this shape, keeping the opacity pretty low. Just feel free to play around and experiment to see what kind of illusion you can get going here. But that's kind of cool that just that nice shape that it creates by knocking that out a little bit. You can also go to your shape 4, add a layer mask to that, and remove some of it in order to create some shadows here. So this will help reinforce the fact that shape 3 is on top, but by adding some more value, we're also getting a little more out of it, just like we did between these two shapes here. All right, so again, if you feel that you've taken too much out, you can always brush it back in just by switching your foreground color back to white. So I'm going to go ahead and do that on shape 4, and maybe just a little bit on shape 3 as well, because the shadows are pretty intense, but I don't want to see the entire edge, maybe just a hint of it, somewhere around there. But that's part of the fun, is just playing around and experimenting and seeing what kind of results you can get from this. So again, and you can see the difference just moving the shape 3 folder either above or below shape 4. But I kind of like it on top there. All right, so keep doing this, another layer, and just try to create some really fluid, random looking shapes. They should be rounded, but there's no set way to do this here. It's just trying to figure it out as you go and build up a nice composition. All right, so some of your shapes can just be a little more spread out. Again, they don't have to all look the same. In fact, we don't want all of the shapes to look the same. What we want is to give the appearance that they're more arbitrary, not only in their shape but also the placement. And it kind of starts to look like a lava lamp, which is kind of cool, and that's the effect that I want. So, all right, we're going to go ahead and fill this shape. Keep it going. Fill up the shape with orange, and we can maybe start to bridge these two areas together. The shapes that we've created on the top and the shapes we've created on the bottom. But we're free to experiment with the placement here a little bit. I'm just transforming it a little and experimenting with the placement, just to see what looks best. So let's add some highlights to this, doing the same thing. But first I will name my layers to help keep things simple, help keep it clean. Okay, switch back to the brush, and this is also just good practice for you guys, to get down this airbrushing concept, and feel free to play around with it. I mean, it works really well with type. If you want to create some nice glossy or shiny looking type, it's always nice to be able to add a couple highlights and shadows here and there. But you don't want to overdo it. Sometimes you want to leave some areas untouched, like here on the lower part of this shape. Otherwise, it'll look like everything is popping out towards us. So I'm just going to play around with the opacity a little bit, see what looks good. I think for now I'm gonna leave it up at 100%, but I will add a layer mask here and brush out a little bit more towards the lower half of this shape here, just to reveal the edge and the shape below. All right, so go ahead and put these two shapes into a folder and call it shape 5. And now you can grab that whole folder and play around with the placement of this shape a little bit more, just to see how it looks. You know, there's no right or wrong way to do this, so you might as well play around and see what you think looks best. Okay, I'm just gonna play around with this mask a little bit more until I can get something that I'm pretty happy with. Alright, you can increase or decrease the size of your brush as you're working. There's using your bracket keys. Okay, take a little bit off the bottom here. Something like that. Okay, I mean, it's nice when you can see it. It's really, you know, translucent, and it helps give that liquidy effect that we're going for. You know, but again, just, you know, rotate, warp. Feel free to you know, modify the shape as you see fit. All right, but I think something like here might be kind of cool too, where you just get we're starting to fill in the middle of the space a little bit. But let's also take a look at what it looks like to move this shape into the back behind our other shapes. So before, you know, the shape was on top, but right now I'm just kind of seeing what it looks like if we actually put it behind some of the other shapes. And, you know, I do this regardless of the type of project I'm working on. You know, every time I add something, you're basically trying to figure out, you know, what you want to keep and what you want to get rid of, which is a good rule of thumb, I think, when you're working and introducing some new things. All right, not really liking that as much as I liked it before. Let's see here. You know what? We're going to place it somewhere in the middle where we had it, and then just continue to build from there. All right, maybe something like that. Okay, so we're just going to move on, and at this point what I'm going to show you guys is you know, another way that you can use the pen tool to create these interesting fluid kind of shapes. So what we've been doing thus far is keeping that on path. What we've been doing so far is just filling our selections once we make them. So this is going to be another shape that will be part of the composition, but you just want to create this kind of loose loose ellipse rather, that kind of mimics the smooth edges that we have going with our other shapes. Alright, so something like this. Go in there and modify the anchor a little bit. Close the shape. And this time what we're going to do is switch to your brush tool and hold down the shift key and type, you know, hold down the shift key and then hit the right bracket to get a harder edge brush as opposed to this, which we were using before to airbrush. Okay, so hard edge brush, we're going to kick the opacity up to 100% by pressing the 0 key on our keyboard, and we'll make our brush around, I don't know, 20 pixels in size. We'll see how that looks. Alright, so hold down the control key and click on your path. Now, instead of hitting make selection, this time we're going to choose stroke path from the menu. Alright, once this menu appears, you want to hit the tab and switch over to brush. Okay, hit alright, and there you go. This is just creating an outline that follows the contour of the path that we created. So you'll notice in here that you can still see the original path. To get rid of that, you can just hit the enter key again, and now you'll just be left with this this ring shape here. Alright, so we're going to add a few of these to our composition, just to add a little more variety. Okay, so we're going to have some little shapes and bubbles, and they're going to vary in size. So, you know, we can do this a few more times. I'm just going to call this, you know, ring 1, something very straightforward, and throw it on into a folder. Okay, so at this point, always good to save. I know CS6 actually, I think, has an autosave feature, which is really nice. It's been a long time that a lot of people have been waiting for that, so it's a good feature. I'm really glad that they added that. Alright, so just coming back in, add a few more of these blob-like shapes here. Okay, and you know, we're not married to it. You know, we can change them. Make selection, okay, and fill with our orange color. All right, so this time around, again, we just want to add a little more variety in terms of the scale and shape, keep things looking a bit more random, which helps with the believability, I think, of the image. You don't want everything looking the same, you know. Gonna go ahead and create another new layer on top, add a clipping mask, and start to brush in some highlights here once I change the blending mode to overlay. Whoa, okay, so I left my brush at 100% for opacity there. I forgot to turn that back down. I'm just going to keep it low and bring in some highlights here, maybe a little on the bottom as well. Okay, and as I mentioned in our previous lesson, you can also add a layer mask to this layer and remove some of the highlights if you think you've gone a bit too far, or if you just want it to be more around the edges rather than the center of the shape. Okay, something like that. Alright, so this is going to be shape 6, and we will throw it in a folder with the same name. Okay, I'm going to zoom out. You can quickly go to your full screen view simply by hitting Command or Control plus 0 on the keyboard. So right now, I'm just kind of moving this piece around to see what looks good. And I'm going to add another layer mask to this shape. Brush out a little bit of the edge here. And you know, you can even go further with it. You can brush out most of the shape if you want and get a really translucent looking bubble here, which you know, depending on your taste and what you're going for, can also give you some pretty cool effects. And again, it's all about, you know, variety and just mixing it up. So adding a few shapes like this may be a good idea. Okay. Alright, so now you can see it just really helps to add a few little pieces of highlights and shadows here and there throughout the composition. So you can also see how it looks, you know, just by moving around the whole folder towards the bottom. Alright, so to achieve that effect, we just added a layer mask and brushed out a little more of our shape. So it's nice to have a few more solid shapes in the background and then a few more transparent ones on the top to really, you know, get the most out of our layers. So I'm just going to continue this process for a few more minutes, and you know, you guys can work here with me. All right, another shape there, new layer, overlay, and then we will brush in the highlights with our brush. Okay. You know, this also works really well if you're using a Wacom tablet, just to give it more of a true feel, like you're really drawing into the piece. And I definitely love having a tablet. I use it all the time. And if you guys don't have one, I would certainly recommend one. It takes a little while to get used to. You know, it took me maybe about a month or so of just, you know, using it to draw shapes and play around with, but you really just got to jump in with both feet sometimes, and just that's the best way to learn, I think. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and add another layer mask to this shape 7 now, and using the black, just brush out some more in the center here. Okay, and you know, experiment with what looks good. Okay, and again, you can move around the whole folder, and you will have both your original shape as well as the highlight layer. Okay, so you can see now we're starting to really fill in the space here and create some more interesting shapes. I may add another ring or two, just as we did here, add a little more variety, but that's just another way that you guys can play around with the pen tool and the brush tool together to create some pretty cool stuff. So we're going to have the size of our brush about 20 pixels, and again, just create another you know, ellipse shape. It doesn't have to be perfect, and it doesn't have to look exactly like the other shape. Okay, but as long as we have something that we're happy with and that looks pretty well rounded, then we're on the right track. Okay. So here we go. That's a little too far. I should have modified this handle, just bringing it down closer to the anchor point. Okay, and then something like that. Stroke path. And this time it will be on our brush because that's what we set it to before. So we're just going to go ahead and hit OK, and then hit the Enter key, and we'll have another ring to play around with. Now this ring looks a little bit thicker, and that's because we reduced the size of our original ring. So by playing around with the scale, you can see how this one actually looks like it's closer to us, which also provides a little bit of depth. We don't want to put these right next to each other. So we can scale it down a little bit. I'm just doing a free transform and holding the Shift key as I click and drag from any four of the corners to either enlarge or reduce the size of this ring. Okay, so this one I'm going to put maybe somewhere towards the bottom, and going to rotate it a little bit and just see what looks good. Okay, and you can also put this layer into a group folder, call it Ring 2, and feel free to also move this layer below some of the other shapes to see how it looks. Alright, so by doing something like this, you can move it around and you just get hints of it rather than the strong solid white. So you can see here it almost looks like it's inside of this bubble because we brushed out a little bit of this color, revealing the ring behind it. Okay, so for now I'm going to leave that there. The Ring 2 is now pretty much at the bottom of our layers palette. And again, this seems like a good place to save your work. And in our next lesson, we're just going to continue to do this for a little bit longer and add some more variety before we introduce our focal point and begin to experiment with some cool lighting effects. So I look forward to sharing that with you guys, and stay tuned.